the New Life podcast. Today we are going to be talking about serving and how that can benefit your walk in Christ. So recently we've mentioned serving in the prayer and fasting podcast because that's been a big focus, I feel like, for our church recently is encouraging people to serve. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more today about just what it is, what we've done, all the fun things.
Yep. Well, before we get into the episode, I'm ready for spring.
Yeah, it's cold.
So we do this in one of the rooms in the basement of our church that has no heat. So I had to come in and turn these two little heaters on, and at this time of the year, these heaters don't do
They can't
much.
keep up.
Yeah,
They cannot keep up.
They're like the old style where like they don't blow much air through them.
No, you have to be like on them so you feel warm.
Yeah, you have to pretty much put them on your skin for them to actually do
Don't do
anything.
that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll have a bunch of little circles on me
if
I did that. But yeah, you're right. We're talking about serving. And I think sometimes we have maybe a misunderstanding of what serving is in the church. It's much more deeper than doing something. It's much more deeper than being in a specific role in the church or doing this specific thing or volunteering for that specific thing. Now, people do that, but then most people don't last doing that because it's not what Jesus means when he calls us to serve. It's not what God means when he calls us to serve. It's not even all the examples we see in the Bible. They had so much more deeper purposes for the things that they did when we're talking about serving. And when we did our notes, when we looked over our notes, you have a much more elegant definition of serving. But like I said a couple weeks ago, I think on one of the episodes, is I like to make things simple.
Yeah.
And when I thought about serving, I said, well, what is it? What does it mean to serve? And the simplest thing I could think of was just to labor for the Lord, work for the Lord. If it's working for anything else, then you're not serving, you're just doing a job.
Yeah.
And God never calls us just to do a job. Like he calls us to labor for him. He calls us to please him.
Yeah, my eloquent definition, as you like to put it, is very similar, but the way I had described it was that serving is, it describes an act of worship, obedience, and labor that often encompasses both serving God and serving others. So kind of along the lines of what you were saying, like if you're not doing it for the Lord or for the right reasons, then it's sort of like that. What's the point? Like you're just doing a job at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I like what in the definition that you so elegantly told us.
I try my best.
Is that it's an act of worship. This is not a view I feel like the church has very often.
No. Usually you come in and you're like, oh, great, I have to do this again because no one else is doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I got to greet this morning because no one's greeting this morning.
No one showed up to hand out the bulletins.
Yeah, or I teach a Sunday school class because somebody's sick or whatever.
And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you're just thrown in.
Yeah, but that's part of it. That's an act. None of those things are bad. All those things are actually good. Now, can they be a little frustrating maybe at times depending on the circumstances? Obviously, things happen. We know those things. But when you consider serving as an act of worship, like you said, you get a much more deeper fulfillment about maybe the things that the world would say are small. Or they don't mean that much, or they're kind of routine or mundane. No, in the church, serving in all capacities is an act of worship. It's to please the Lord. It's not for yourself. It's for others. It's for the body of Christ. It's to build each other up. It's to encourage one another, whatever your spot is in the church. And that could be from, doing the slides at your church, or that could be teaching a Sunday school class or pastoring. All those are acts of worship because God's given us gifts to use, to serve, and to labor for him. And Christ gives us so many different kind of examples of serving just through his ministry, how he served people while he was here on the earth. And like we could go through all of the gospels and just pretty much sum it up as an act of service to people. He says, in one of the things where he tells the disciples, to feed the hungry and the thirsty and clothe the naked and all those different things. Jesus constantly called the disciples to serve, but he didn't just call them to serve. He showed them what it means to serve. I think, with all the different examples that are in the Bible, serving is what grounds us. It's what keeps us, which we'll talk about some of the character traits here coming up, but keeps us humble, because this life's not all about you. And if you look throughout the New Testament, you find that out pretty quickly. That I would say the majority, once you come to Christ, it is no longer about you anymore. Yeah. It's about seeking out those that need Christ. It's about helping the sick and the needy, the orphan and the widow. It's about loving on one another as Christ has loved us. It's about forgiving others as Christ has forgiven us. There's so many different examples of service in the Bible.
Well, I have Galatians 5:13 here, where it says, "For you were called to be free, brothers and sisters. Only don't use this freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another through love." And it's exactly like you were saying. Like, once we have salvation, our focus shouldn't be on, okay, well, how does this benefit me? You shouldn't be serving to say, okay, I'm going to do this because it's going to make me look good, or people are going to be like, oh, wow, look at all the stuff that Savannah does. It's supposed to be about God and about the people that are going to benefit from the service.
Yeah. And I think some people do have that kind of outlook on serving. And Jesus says in Mark 10:45, it says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." Even Jesus, who is the King, right? He's the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, said that his purpose wasn't to come to be served like a king would be, but to serve. And that's the same thing with us. That should be our attitude. That should be our mindset in the Christian life, is not for the church or for other believers or the world or whoever to serve me, but how can I serve those that are around me? And then, obviously Jesus tells his mission, which is to give his life up. And I think there is a sense there in the act of service is you're giving yourself up for the betterment of those around you, to help others around you.
Yeah, and like we were saying earlier, nothing is too big or too small that you're doing. Like, everything has value to it when you're serving with the right purpose. And Colossians 3:23 says, "Whatever you do, do it from the heart as something done for the Lord and not for people." And I think, like you were saying too, like, the stuff we should be doing should be glorifying and honoring God. And so when you're doing something, even if it doesn't seem that important, like, you might think, okay, I'm just giving people bulletins. Like, how is that big of a deal? But if you're going at it with this right mindset to know that you're honoring God through doing this, you saying hi to someone could completely turn around their day, even if it doesn't seem that big of a deal to you. But you being there to be like a first welcoming face, like, that has a purpose in the kingdom.
And so I'll share a story. I remember it was very early on in my Christian walk. I've probably only been a Christian for like 2 or 3 years, maybe. I can't quite remember. I know I was in high school, and I was painting. It was all by myself. I was painting one of the walls upstairs in our fellowship hall, and I'm just painting away. And I just remember at that point in my walk is I was doing a lot of it to be recognized or for a pat on the back or all those things, especially a teenager probably would want anyways in their life. And I remember painting that wall, and I just really felt a sense from the Holy Spirit that just saying, you're not doing any of this for me. Everything that you're doing means nothing because it's not for me. And that moment there changed my outlook on serving to exactly what we're talking about, that that it's to glorify the Lord. It's not to glorify man. It's to glorify Him. To do everything, to do all good, to glorify Him, to please Him. And that helped me, through all these different stages of my life, when it comes to doing all the different things that I've done in the church, to do it well.
Yeah.
And to do it well is exactly what we just said. To do it for the Lord. Some people are worried, well, if I do this position in the church, am I going to be good at it? Or am I going to do it well?
Yeah.
Well, there's only one question you have to ask yourself to do it well. Are you going to do it for the Lord? If your answer is no, then you're not going to do it well.
Yeah.
But if your answer is yes, it doesn't matter if you struggle or you feel like you're not equipped, or maybe you're actually not equipped to do that position, yet God is still calling you to do it. If you do it to please Him, well, you've done it well then. And He'll equip you. He'll provide what you need to do that in your life. But you can at least say, I did it well.
Yeah.
I think of all these different examples in the Bible. We could say, who's the best example of serving? Jesus.
Yeah.
But there's also many other.
That's a very Sunday school answer.
There's many different examples, and I think the two that stood out to me the most, and they're back to back, is Moses and Joshua. Because I think it shows an all-encompassing service, not just just serving because God called you to serve, but there's servant leadership there. There's all different types of service in those two stories, and they both had the same mindset, is that they wanted to please God. And also the same is they both had a very long journey. Serving wasn't a one and done thing for Moses and Joshua.
Yeah. Well, and you saw the good and bad of serving. It wasn't just rainbows and butterflies the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. There was times where they didn't serve well.
Yeah.
And we see that. And there's times where they served very well. And we see those as well. But you think about the span of Moses's serving career, if that's how you want to put it.
Yes.
Is there was, for the most part, they saw some amazing things during serving, but they also didn't make it to the promised land because of sin and all those different things too. But yet Moses didn't stop serving because of it, right? It makes sense to be walking through a trial in life and be like, well, I'm going to pause, right? I'm going to stop serving. I'm going to start focusing on this problem, or I'm going to be upset about this issue in my life. Moses didn't do that. He continued to press on. He continued to serve. And then, serving is not done even when you pass away.
Yeah.
He passes the baton to Joshua.
Yeah.
And he starts serving. And he starts pleasing the Lord in servant leadership and all those different things as well.
Yeah.
I think back all the times that God called me to serve. He called me to serve in lots of different places in the church. But the first thing where did I first start? When I actually got committed to serving.
Not painting walls?
No, it wasn't painting walls.
No.
The painting walls is actually after this, probably. But the first thing I ever did, and it was really before I started coming to church faithfully when I became a believer, is I started going down the meal ministry. And I always had a sense of wanting to help people, when I could.
Yeah.
But this was a different thing I had never done. What we do at the meal ministry is we feed people, every night. At that time, every night. Now we do lunches too.
Yeah, it's really expanded since high school years.
And I remember going down there every Friday with one of the mentors here at church who got me to start serving, showed me what serving means. And I remember just kind of opening up my eyes to the fact that life is not all about me, right? There's other people that need help. There's other people that are hungry. There's other people that need food. Just your basic necessity in life is food. But yet there are people struggling to get that basic necessity. And it just showed me that, again, life's not all about me. The church is not all about me, right? The church should be about others. It should be about loving one another, not just inside the church, but even outside the church. And that's what we did at the meal ministry. And sometimes serving's messy,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it's not, like you said, rainbows and sunshine and all those things, right? It can be messy because people are messy. That's why serving's messy. And, I kind of just to put it in perspective, God didn't think we were too messy to help us.
Yeah.
We shouldn't think other people are too messy to serve because God didn't think that way to us. And I think that helps me serving in a lot of different areas. I think sometimes too, before I list all the different things.
You have an extensive list.
Yeah, but everybody does. This is my point, is that sometimes we think God called me to this one thing, right?
Yeah.
I got this one special thing. And you might. And I do think God calls them to a specific thing. But I also think God calls us to multiple things.
Yeah.
It's not a one and done thing. It's not like, boom, I got it, I'm set for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because trust me, I will tell you that God can change those things
100%.
very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And he did throughout my Christian life, and I'm sure he'll still call me to different areas. That's why I think pastoring is interesting, because you do all types of things.
Yeah. You do all of the above.
And so some of the things I did was after the meal, I taught Sunday school, I taught children's church, and I taught youth. I have done the sound and slides. I've sang at one point. That's probably about it.
Well, that's probably not about it, but that's probably like the main.
But those are like the roles that I've done.
Yeah.
Not including volunteering.
Yeah.
Painting and working and doing some work days.
Making the coffee every morning.
Making the coffee, stuff like that. And shoveling snow. I've done all those things.
Yeah.
And now I'm pastoring.
Yeah.
Every single one of those things that I did, I never thought that I would have done any of those things. Not just before I was in Christ. During.
Yeah.
When I became a believer. I would have never guessed I would have done any of those things in my life. And those things taught me how to be a stronger and better believer. And it taught me how to be a stronger pastor in the Christian life.
And if anyone wants to serve in any position, you've done it. So you can you can
Not,
let them know how it is.
Maybe not as good, I guess, as what I know other people could do.
Yeah.
So that helps me encourage them and say, if I could do it, then
you definitely can do it.
You sure can.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I definitely did the meal ministry thing. You were talking about that, and I was like, oh yeah. Like, it's just like things you forget that you've done. You're like, oh yeah, I did do that for a while. But the main thing I always think about is my role in kids ministry. So my journey was a little different because we both started coming to church about the same time, but then I went the college route. So
what she just said is that my husband is dumb.
No, that's not what I said. Did not say that.
You might as well said it. You said it.
No. I went the college route, and so I really didn't get.
Wait. So every time you say I went the college route, all I think of is the game of life. And yes. I went straight to work.
You went straight to work.
And you went to college.
Honestly, you probably made the better choice. Who's in debt for the rest of your life? This girl.
No, you're not. Not even close.
But anyways, so because of that, I feel like I really limited myself in serving at first. I mean, obviously, I was still trying to figure out this whole Christian thing. But I knew that I'd be leaving, so I never really plugged in to anything crazy because I was like, well, if I plug in, I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
Like, that's not helpful. So a lot of my serving didn't start till after I was, like, back from school. And I ended up doing a lot with kids ministry, which just aligned with what I went to school for, because I went to school for elementary education. So I think young Christian me just thought, like, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what you're doing in that. And it wasn't like it was just, like, God wasn't calling me to that. I really felt like that was the direction God wanted for me. But it also was comfortable because I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I went to school for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, So I did a few different things with kids ministry. I mean, I taught for a while. We had Sunday night like Bible study, so I co-taught the kids class during that time. I taught life groups for quite a few years, teaching the older kids. I have coordinated VBS for I don't know how many years.
Yeah, it's probably
A
been
lot.
like 4 years.
And within that was sometimes I was teaching, and lately now it's just been more like organizing the volunteers because we have a solid group, so I can kind of stay behind the scenes and just fill in when there's a crisis because there's always something happening. But a lot of stuff with kids, and then I was overseeing the kids ministry just department for a while, finding teachers, finding curriculums, and so I did that for about 6 years. But I've also done other things, like I've done the PowerPoint before, click the space bar when the words change. Been a greeter when needed. I taught a youth life group 1 week, so that was stressful. There was a lot of stress the night before when I got the text saying, hey, I'm sick. I need you to teach this. And I said, okay. But hey, they learned something, I think. So, but mostly kids has kind of been where my focus has been. But, I mean, we've talked about this outside of the podcast and work and everything. That's kind of been transitioning for me. And I think that we've talked about this too, like serving isn't usually just one thing, and God can put you in one place at one time and then put you in a different place at another time. So I've actually stepped down from being the kids like director. Not that doesn't mean I'm not going to be serving in some capacity. I'll still be helping out, subbing, VBS, but God has shifted my focus and serving to be more like hospitality focused. So I'm kind of in the process of moving to doing the cafe stuff in the mornings. I've been focusing more on our women's ministry, which is still fairly new. So I'm like one of the leaders in that team. And then just doing discipleship. And I think God has shifted my focus more from the kids of the church to more of like the whole church. And so it's kind of cool to like see that shift, even though it is scary to change when you've been doing something for 6 years and then all of a sudden change how you're serving in the church.
I think it's beneficial. Now, God doesn't always call us this way. I do think he does a lot of the times, but he doesn't always do that. It's a good practice, I think, in the church to be involved in every type of group in some capacity. Because in doing that, you're teaching yourself how to serve all types of people. How to love all types of people. And that's very beneficial in the church because the church hopefully has all different types of ages. It has babies and it has toddlers and it has teenagers and it has young adults and it has 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and maybe 90-year-olds in your church. And all have to be served in different ways. It's something I've learned as pastoring. Pastoring overall has to be flexible. You have to pastor the people in different ways because they all need different things. Everybody, and even individually, even in the same age group, those people need different things at times because everyone goes through different things in life. And I think that's important if you can, and if God leads you that way, to try to be involved in every type of ministry at some point. Maybe it's not for very long. Maybe it's, just at least to understand what this ministry is. Maybe it's just sitting down and talking to the leader and just saying, why do you do this? Those are all beneficial things to do. Maybe scary things to do, and we'll talk about that at the end, about uncomfortable situations. But if you want to be a leader, a servant leader in your church, you've got to start to get to know the things that you could do in the church through kids in nursery and maybe the sound or worship or whatever, all different areas in the church, so many different lists. And, I think there's many different characteristics of a servant. I think the number one, and if you do research, it is always the number one on every single
Yeah.
thing that you could ever look up about leader or about being a servant, and all different facets of what that means is humility. When I say humility, what do you think of when I say humility?
Usually it's not doing things for yourself.
Mhm.
Like you don't want necessarily the recognition.
Okay.
So
Yeah, she's upset because I put her on the spot. That wasn't in what we're
panic.
talking about. And
Yeah, you didn't give me time to Google a really eloquent definition.
yeah, so you had to give the simple definition.
Yeah.
That was a good definition. You're not putting yourself above anybody else, right? Humility is putting yourself lower than those around you, or it's about putting others first, you know. And I think that has got to be number
Yeah.
one for a reason. And again, these aren't in any specific order. Like if you have this, then you'll be all right.
Yeah.
That's not how any of this works. But you've got to have humility because if you don't, you're probably not going to serve very well.
Yeah. If you go in expecting that you're the best of the best, the only one who can do it, it's probably not going to go very well.
Yeah, and you won't be blessed through it. This is
No.
why all these character traits provide the ability for the Lord to bless you because you're living faithfully in serving.
Yeah.
And I think that brings up the second one is faithfulness. You can't. You've got to do what God's called you to do, and you got to be faithful in it. You got to serve faithfully, and that has a lot of different ideas to it. Faithfulness, in maybe just a simple sense, is being there.
Yeah.
If you're not there, you can't serve.
That's why I think it often starts with, before you even think about serving, you have to be faithful even just to attending service. Like if you're not even faithful to being at church, how are you going to be faithful to serve?
You know, if the thing that you're serving in is teaching, and you're supposed to teach at 10 o'clock, you got to be there.
Yeah.
Right? You can't be like, well, I'm going to miss today. I'm going to miss the next day or the next week. If you keep doing that, then you're not in that role. Even if you have that role for a time, I promise you at some point you probably won't if that's what ends up happening.
You'll probably get replaced.
Yeah. It is because there's a ministry that needs somebody there. But faithfulness also the Lord blesses because it takes a sense of courage to do it, to do something that you're probably not equipped for, because most of the things in the church, no one is actually equipped for. It's the Lord who equips you to do those. So you got to have a sense of courage just to be faithful in what God, because it can be easy at times to be like, well, this is worthless. I'm not even, maybe you're teaching, it feels like nobody's listening, or maybe you're in the nursery and the kids are all over the place, or maybe you keep messing up the slides at church, or maybe you're a singer at the church and you keep messing up the words, or all the different things. It can be tempting sometimes to be like, well, I'll let somebody else do it. It's not working out, right? I'll step away and I'll do something else. Or maybe it's life, right? Life gets character. And there are times you got to talk to the Lord about these things, because there are times where you have to step away because the Lord is either calling you somewhere else, or he's saying you got to focus on this thing in your life before these things.
Yeah.
Sometimes that does happen. But I will say a lot of times what happens is there is something that happens in our life that maybe is a little chaotic. Maybe it's a trial in your life or a problem in your life. And you say, well, I'm going to step away. I'm going to stop being faithful in serving. I'm going to focus on these things. Again, sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times you don't. And the Lord still wants you to be faithful in serving, and wants you to be faithful to the problem, to focus on the problem in your life. You can do both at times. But yet you step away and you miss out on a blessing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where faithfulness and obedience almost go hand in hand, because like you said, not only do you have to be faithful because you have to be reliable, you have this role that you're in that people are expecting you to do, but also if God is calling you to do it, you need to be obedient to what God is calling you to do. I mean, that's just part of the Christian walk.
Yeah. And the next one is compassion. Serving without compassion is you're probably not doing a lot of people any favors. Because sometimes we can get hard. Sometimes our heart can be hard, especially sometimes the longer you're in ministry,
Yeah.
the longer you're serving, because of the things we talked about. Oh, I got to do this again.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to do that again. We have a bad
You're just
attitude.
going through the motions of it.
And things like, why is that person in that situation?
Yeah.
Or why do I got to help this person? I always got to help this person.
Yeah.
If you're starting to act like that or think like that, then there's an issue because you're lacking compassion. So many times the Lord Jesus looked upon the people and it said he had compassion for them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have compassion in serving because they're hurting people that need it. Just like Jesus knew that the people needed compassion. And compassion motivates you to actually have a desire to serve.
Mm-hmm.
Without compassion, you probably don't have the desire to want to serve. But compassion produces in you the desire to serve and to love others and to be committed
Yeah.
to helping others, because you don't want to stop because you have compassion
Yeah.
on them. You want them to get help. You want them to be taught, or all different things. Maybe it's cleaning the church. You got to have compassion in cleaning the church. I know that seems silly or weird to think about, but compassion will keep you consistent. It will keep you motivated to doing maybe as something as you seem simple, even though it's not, as cleaning the church. That can be a ministry to those around you, as long as it's filtered with compassion.
Yeah. I also think, even just along the same lines, that you have to be encouraging, not only to those that you're serving, but often to those that are serving alongside you, because, I mean, serving's not always the easiest thing to do. Like, you're going to have frustrations. Some days are just going to be hard. Like, you're going to have a bad morning where you get up and you're just like, you got up on the wrong side of the bed. You're not feeling it. But if you can be someone who's encouraging to those serving alongside you, not only are you going to help them have a better day, but then that's going to impact how they're serving. And if you have an encouraging attitude towards serving, that's going to often bring other people in. They're going to want to be part of what you're doing, and they're going to want to serve because they're going to see just how positive that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Encouragement is right up there with all these that I'm talking about. Not only do you need to encourage others, because we're all called to do that, but sometimes you got to encourage yourself. Let the Lord, let the Holy Spirit encourage you to keep going, because again, it's not going to be easy all the time. You're not just going to always be flourishing. Sometimes you just got to go and you got to keep pushing.
Well, and sometimes if you're that one person who goes up to somebody and you're like, hey, like, I see these qualities in you. I really think you could do this. That could be that like little push that someone needs to like take that step to serve, because we're all hard on ourselves. They're like, oh, I can't do this. Like, I'm not good at coming in and teaching. Like, I don't know enough about the Bible. But someone else is going to be like, you actually know quite a bit and you're really good with people. Like, you should just try it. Like, and that might give them the encouragement that they need to step in and just give it a try.
Yeah. And when I think of like a godly servant, is they have to be willing. Willingness to do what God wants you to do, no matter what it is. So many times when I got called to preach, it took 2 years to actually be to surrender to that call. Why? It's because I struggled with willingness, because I didn't think I would be able to do it. I didn't think I'd be equipped to do it. I didn't think I was adequate to do it, and I didn't want to do it because of those things. But I missed 2 years on a blessing from the Lord because I didn't do it. So when to be a godly servant and for the Lord to bless you, you have to be willing, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's scary, to be the leader of this, or to teach this, or to do anything. And maybe God is calling you to a major thing, which could be all sorts of things. Maybe He is calling you to be a missionary or something like that. And if you don't have willingness in your life, in your Christian life, it's going to probably be very difficult to do it. But again, I'll say, if you don't do it, then you're missing out on an opportunity and you're missing out on an opportunity for the Lord to bless in all the different ways that He blesses our life. And the last one that I have here is a servant leader, with all these included, has to seek to please the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said in the beginning, on me painting that wall, I wasn't doing it to please the Lord. I was doing it to please man.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't benefit me. It didn't benefit the church. You might say, well, you painted their
You
wall.
painted a wall.
That means nothing.
Yeah.
But a person, a servant who does it to please the Lord, not only does he please the Lord, but he's helping his church where he serves. He's helping the overall church, but he's helping his local church where he serves. And again, if you're doing it not to please the Lord, or you're doing it for yourself, or you're doing it for others, maybe you're just doing it to fill a role in your church, you might as well leave it empty. Yeah. I know that sounds tough, because God will call someone else to do it then.
Yeah.
You're going to end up taking a spot, and you're going to hurt the church, you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And you're going to end up being in a spot that you should never have been in.
Yeah.
Sometimes we got to figure out our heart before we're ready to serve.
Yeah.
And the only one that can figure out your heart is the one who knows your heart, and that's Christ.
Yeah.
Let Christ figure your heart out, and then you're ready to serve. And that doesn't take forever. Why I say that is because sometimes we get in a place where it's like, well, I'm still working on my heart.
Yeah.
It's been years.
Yeah, you're expecting your heart to be like at its ultimate best.
Yeah. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
Pray to the Lord, ask the Lord to give you a servant heart, mm-hmm. so that you can please Him. Above all else, you can please the Lord in everything you do, right? Word, deed, do it all in the name of the Lord. That's a great mindset to have. And there's many different, obviously, when you think of a bad servant, you think of the opposites.
Basically all the opposites.
But 3 of them stand out to me. Pride.
Yeah.
Pride is a hindrance to your Christian life in all facets of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're falling into pride, I promise you're not a servant. And you just can't be, because serving is all about everybody else.
Yeah.
And pride says it's all about me. And the next one is you have no sense of responsibility. Mm-hmm. God calls us to be responsible.
Yeah.
He calls us to work. He calls us to labor for Him.
Yeah.
He calls us to be obedient and faithful. All those have a sense of responsibility. I got to be accountable. And a bad servant they just don't have that sense of accountability. They don't have a sense of responsibility. And the last one is a person that just seeks out recognition.
Yeah.
If that's what you're doing, if you're seeking out recognition, what happens when you don't get it? You probably stop serving.
Yeah.
You may strive for it in other areas, but here's the thing. The disciples and the apostles never got pat on the backs.
Yeah.
They got a lot of times the opposite, right? They got strikes, mm-hmm. on their back. They got persecution on their back. They were beaten and bruised for serving. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, there's a sense of when you're kind of looking for that recognition in your life, is you're just you find, basically what I'm trying to say here is you're just trying to fill something that the Lord should already be filling. That's the easiest way that I can think of explaining this, is that the Lord is supposed to be the one that satisfies you.
Yeah.
That's where your recognition comes from. Mm-hmm. It comes from the Lord. He's the one that lifts you up, not men, because men will fail. Men will fail at lifting up, even if they should be encouraging to you.
Yeah.
Maybe not lifting you up, but encouraging you, because you're being faithful in what you're doing. And they don't. Rely on the Lord to lift you up. Mm-hmm. Because it's not that it's bad to have a pat on the back. It's not bad to be encouraged in where you're going. Or saying, wow, you're doing a great job. Mm-hmm. Those things are good. Like you said, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
That's a person that's serving and encouraging. But
you shouldn't be doing it to seek the encouragement.
Yeah, because you'll probably stop serving. Because to be honest, we all don't encourage like we should.
Mhm.
We don't recognize those that deserve recognition like we should in the Christian life. And there's many different other ones, like I said, the opposites
Of
of
everything.
all of these.
But hopefully by this point, we've talked a lot about serving. Hopefully in your head you're like, okay, maybe I should be serving.
Mhm.
But now comes the whole, okay, what do I do?
Yeah, how do I do it? I
Can't
know
make
how to be a
it.
serve. I know the characteristics now.
Yeah.
I know the different areas maybe I can serve. I know what serving is, but then like, where's my first step?
You're like, well, there's so many options. What do I do?
Yeah, where's my first step? And I think before we maybe list some more practical things, is you've got to choose to do it.
Yeah.
Now that seems simple, but it's actually pretty hard.
Yeah, back to the characteristics. You have to be willing.
Yeah, you've got to choose to do it. You've got to say, okay, I'm actually going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to serve.
Yeah.
Even if
Step
you don't.
one, commit to serving.
Yeah. Even if you don't know where, your first step is not figuring out what to do.
Yeah.
It's choosing to do it no
Yeah.
matter what it is. And I think the verse that stood out to me the most is Joshua 24:15. It says, "And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." This is at the tail end of Joshua. Not the end, but the tail end of Joshua. And he's letting the people know, you have a choice.
Yeah.
You can choose to do your own thing. You can choose to do what other people do.
Mhm.
Or you can choose to serve the Lord.
Mhm.
We have the same choice every day.
Yeah.
Every day you wake up, you got that choice to serve or not serve. But again, there's many different ways to start in your church serving.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and probably the easiest thing to do, is to just first consider what is needed in your church.
Mhm.
Because every church has different needs, has different focuses, and those needs change from month to month, week to week. So really sitting and thinking, okay, what's a big need right now, and is that something that I can fill in? Is that something that God's calling me to take on? Because that is going to be beneficial to your church, but only if it's what God's calling you to do.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily have to just jump in because the church has been needing a worship leader for years, and you're like, well, I guess I'll do this, but then really that's not where you're being called to, because it's not going to help.
No. So yeah, exactly. Find the need in your church. Ask yourself, what can I do for the church? Yeah. A lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, but I do think there are people that they go in thinking, well, what does the church do for us?
Yeah.
And hopefully the church is doing something for people, because that's what it's called to do. But we really should go in with the mindset is, what can I do for this church?
Mm-hmm.
That helps. Maybe you're out searching for a church right now where God's called you to. You got to pray, Lord, where do you want me? Not where I want to be, but where do you want me to be? And then what do you want me to do here?
Mm-hmm.
That if you start viewing the church like that, it might not take you as long to find the place God's called you to, because you have the right attitude, right? You have the right attitude. I'm going to do something to help this church do what it's called to do, which is to help others. If that's, man, the church would be filled with encouragement and love and forgiveness, and it wouldn't be idle. It would be strong, and it would go out, and it would be the hands and feet of Jesus if we had that attitude. But we're all in different places, and we're all struggling.
And if you're having this attitude of what can I do for the church, I think that's where it's important to consider, okay, like, what are your spiritual gifts?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are your personal talents? Like, what has God already equipped you with that you can use to benefit the church? Because you're already given spiritual gifts. You're already given your talents. So how does that translate into serving? How can that play into a role that already exists, or into a role that could exist one day?
Yeah. When you examine your life and you say, well, what am I good at?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the Lord can help you be good at all things.
Mm-hmm.
But God, like you said, God's given you gifts, spiritual gifts. He's given some people talents for different things. Those are good indications of where God may be calling you to serve. because He's already
Yeah, He's
equipping
already
you.
equipped you.
Sometimes we think, well, the Lord's going to equip me. Sometimes He's already equipping you
Mhm.
for what He's about to call you to do. So examine your life. Lord, what gifts have you given me? And what are some talents that I have that can be beneficial to the church? All those are great starts to just getting involved in your church.
Yeah.
Sometimes you may see a need in your church, like we talked about. Go to the pastor. Say, this is what I see we need.
Yeah.
How can I help? What can I do? And I bet your pastor would be pretty excited. I'm not saying that's going to happen in a moment, because sometimes things have to be worked out. Sometimes we got to do some learning and equipping of our own, reading a book, finding, going through the Bible and looking at examples of how to serve in this capacity. Sometimes it takes a little time if you see a need in the church to get it off the ground.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you stop. You don't look for it, or you don't do it at all. Find the person that would be, maybe it's something in children's church that you see that, oh wow, I think there's a need here.
Yeah.
Go to the person who leads it and say, hey, this is the need. How can I help? Not, hey, I just see a need here. I think we should do something about it. That does nobody any good. Because you should be the one doing it. If you see the need, you should be the one meeting the need in some capacity, whether that's doing it yourself or helping facilitate to be able to help in that area.
That's what I think. Sometimes seeing like what is missing is one of the like coolest ways to see people serve. Because I mean, like you said, it's so easy to be like, well, if the church does have this, then it would be so much better. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that's what you're called to do. But like you were saying, sometimes we see things, we're like, okay, this is missing. How can I do that? And I just think of one of the guys that's part of the children's church team, and he was part of the team prior, but he was in a different role, and like he just felt like, God was calling him, hey, there's nothing for the kids on Wednesdays. They're just sitting in service, usually causing more distraction than anything, because kids don't like to sit. And he was like, hey, I think like there should be something for kids. Like, I'm going to step up and take that. And it was a big step for this individual. But I mean, they were equipped with the skills already, and they had the passion for it. And it was what God was calling them to. And now there's a Wednesday night kids program. And it's exciting just to see how those opportunities can come about when you see what's missing, but then are faithful to what God's calling you, if He's calling you to take it on.
And to kind of sum up this episode, serving is uncomfortable. Every type of serving is uncomfortable at some point. Even if you have the gifts and talents, at some point it's going to get uncomfortable. At some points maybe you're not going to feel adequate or equipped to do it. But yet you've got to get out of your comfort zone. God has so much in store for you if you would just take a step outside of your comfort zone. And it can be scary. I'm not trying to downplay it at all. Stepping out can be scary because God's not always going to give you exactly the future. I'm not even saying that it's whatever God called you to is going to be successful. But I can say that everything God calls you to is for a purpose.
Yeah.
It has a meaning. It's not for no reason. God doesn't call us arbitrarily to, I just want you to do it because I want you to do it. He has a purpose for it. So even if God calls you to be a teacher in Sunday school, maybe you're only a teacher for 2 weeks. That could happen.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, this just wasn't for me. Or maybe just nobody came. Or whatever.
Yeah.
That was still for a purpose. That was still to equip you in some capacity, whether to be a teacher down the road, to get you maybe just maybe it was just to get you finally to take a step so you'd be more willing to take a bigger step down the road. Or maybe it's sometimes the Lord shows us, hey, this isn't for you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call you to this to do for a moment so that you know that, hey, I'm calling you to something else or something different. But it doesn't mean that was for no reason, right? That had a purpose, and it had meaning for why. So don't just say, well, I ain't never gonna do it, because this individual that you just talked about did say that.
Yeah.
They
said that for a while.
I'm not gonna be a teacher. I'll be a helper.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna be a teacher.
Here they are.
And here they are teaching.
And thriving.
So be careful what you say you'll never do. God just might call you to do it. So
and I just want to piggyback off of that before we
Mhm.
close everything. But I think don't forget too that like no role is too big or too small. No role is more important than another. Like everything that is there for you to serve, any way that you can serve, and anything that God calls you to, like you said, has value. It's important. So don't feel like what you're doing or what you feel like God's calling you to, like, oh, that's small. Like it's not that big of a deal. Like no, everything's a big deal. Like the worship leader is just as important as the person who shovels snow. That's just as important as the person who preaches the message compared to the person who does the slides. Like everything has a purpose and everything is valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So that concludes our episode for this week. If you like this episode, go ahead and like and subscribe. Again, we're trying to get to 50 subscribers by June. So we would love for you to share and just kind of encourage others to watch and support us. Comment down below where you serve in your church. Comment down below not just where you serve, but why you love doing it. Why you love serving the Lord. Why you love serving in the areas God's called you to. I would love to hear. We would love to hear just how God has called you to serve in whatever capacity He's called you to serve. We just thank you for listening and watching New Life Podcast.